I first welcome everyone to tonight's planning committee meeting. I know some have been before, but just for information to the public, there are some toilets straight outside. There is also a drinks machine if at any point you would like to have a drink. On my left, we've got Helen Mitchell, Director of Corporate Customer Services. We have the Council's legal beadle, Kerry France, who is the solicitor. And then to my right, Councillor Sue Burfoot, who is the Vice Chair of Planning. And then we have Chris Whitmore, Director of Planning, and, Development Manager, and Sarah Arbor. What's your official title, sir? Senior Planning Officer. Oh dear. Plus a selection of the nominated elected members of the Planning Committee. So we will start first of all by recording apologies for absence, please. Are there any apologies?
Councillor Burton.
Sorry.
Sorry, I'll give you the apologies. Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you. We've had apologies from Councillor Lees, substitute Councillor Bates, apologies from Councillor O'Brien and Councillor Whitehead. Thank you.
Are there any further apologies? No? Right, thank you. So we move now to the approval of minutes of the previous meeting. On the agenda, they're pages 9 to 12. Before I ask someone to move whether or not they are a correct record of what there and thereon took place, do any members have anything they wish to raise from those minutes? The only thing for myself was, in terms of the chair, on that night it was Councillor O'Brien. Do we not normally record who actually... So perhaps that could be inserted. Yeah. So, pages 9 to 12, would any member at this point kindly move that those minutes be accepted? Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Does that find a seconder? Councillor Slack. All those in favour, please show. Any abstentions? Just one abstention. Thank you, members. Those minutes are carried then. So we turn now to section 4 of tonight's agenda, public participation. We have a number of people tonight. Can I just ask Angela, is this the pertaining list that... Yes. Right, thank you. So the first person I'm going to call upon to speak to the Planning Committee is Mr. Luke Harwood on behalf of the Acorn Meadows Residents Group, and you're to speak against the application for the 33 dwelling houses, vehicular access, public open space, drainage, landscaping and associated works, land south of Mercaston Lane and east of Lute Lane, Brailsford. And Luke, you've got 3 minutes.
So due to time constraints, this statement will be delivered in 3 parts. So ladies and gentlemen, members of the committee, my name is Luke Harwood and I serve as Head of Digital Services UK and Ireland for HIAB. However, this evening I stand before you not in my professional capacity, but as a representative of the Brailsford community. My family, much like others, relocated to the village in 2020, enticed by the tranquil rural lifestyle synonymous with country living. We were captivated by the village's distinctive character, its verdant fields, diverse wildlife, quaint local shop, the village pub, and to the extent that I would say I often felt like I lived on holiday. Regrettably, this tranquility proved to be less enduring than anticipated, As we settled into our new environment, we discovered that recent developments in the village, including the very one we now reside in, have taken a toll on the once beautiful rural haven. So unless otherwise stated, all quotes and excerpts are taken from sources available to the public on the Derbyshire Dales Planning website and can be made available at request. Before I proceed, I would like to draw your attention to excerpts of a letter from our very own Member of Parliament for Derbyshire Dales, Sarah Dines, dated the 4th of March 24. What I must reiterate is what I'm on record as saying many times, including at a public meeting of Brailsford residents. Brailsford is full. I simply do not accept that there is a need for an additional 33 houses in the village. This is still a rural location and the infrastructure cannot cope with further speculative housing. Recent resident research has revealed that there are currently 19 properties for sale in the village, including some from the Acorn Meadows development, with several listings having been relisted, prices reduced. This data strongly suggests an oversaturation of available properties, raising questions about the necessity and practicality of introducing additional housing units when the current market already presents a surplus. The 2016 assessment evaluated the land in question, identifying it within an area of high landscape sensitivity. The landscape assessment concluded that the capacity for development was limited. However, it was also noted that the capacity existed in the southern part of the site, situated away from the highest ground and in proximity to the existing development. The 2016 assessment deemed it appropriate to identify only 50% of the site as developable, suggesting that this portion had the potential for development while acknowledging the need for substantial screening vegetation on the northern boundary. The current question arises from the apparent shift in designation, as the entirety of the land is now considered 100% developable, raising concerns about the consistency and the justification for this change in assessment. And that is the end of my section. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Luke. The next speaker is John Bridges, please, again on behalf of the Acorn Meadows Residents Group. And John, you're to speak against the application. And John, you've got 3 minutes.
Ladies, gentlemen, members of the committee, my name is Jonathan Bridges. I am a greenkeeper at Brailsford Golf Course and a resident of Acorn Meadows. In continuation of the previous speaker, I would now like to bring your attention to several factors. Infrastructure. Despite the explicit conditions set in 2018 by DCC Highways Development Control, the requirement for the provision of secure and accessible bicycle parking within the approved development has not been fulfilled. The condition, aimed at promoting sustainable travel and fostering healthy communities, mandated that no individual dwelling in the development could be occupied until such cycling facilities were in place, with the storage area maintained for this purpose thereafter. The failure to comply with this stipulation is notably evident in the DCC Highways report dated the 27th of February 24, raising concerns about the lack of progress in implementing the necessary cycle parking facilities. As a consequence, this unfilled condition now extends to the new development, emphasising the persistence of the issue despite the passage of time and the explicit requirements outlined in 2018. Roads. The village faces a critical transportation challenge with only 2 access routes. Firstly, the A52, a major thoroughfare carrying substantial commuter traffic and heavy goods vehicles, traverse through the village centre. The presence of narrow pavements along this road poses safety concerns as they are insufficient for safe pram navigation or side-by-side walking. Despite an offer from the parish council to conduct a meeting with Highways on the pavement to discuss this matter, it was declined on safety grounds. The second route, Luke Lane, not only hosts the proposed new developments, but is also home to the village school. This road connects to processing premises for concrete, sand and building materials, resulting in a daily influx of HGVs and articulated lorries. The situation is compounded by hazardous parking near the school during peak morning and afternoon schoolroom periods, creating a further challenge for the already congested Luke Lane. Proposed developments worsens existing traffic issues, necessitating careful consideration of the broader impact on the village's transportation infrastructure. Flooding. The recent surge in developments within Brailsford has resulted in an alarming increase in flooding throughout the village, predominantly attributed to the proliferation of new residential roads and extensive hard surfaces. The inadequacy of the outdated sewerage systems has become glaringly apparent, unable to cope with the substantial influx of water stemming from the expanded network of impermeable surfaces. The absence of necessary upgrades to the sewerage infrastructure worsens the problem, leaving the village to suffer flooding during periods of heavy rainfall. Moreover, the adverse consequences of this are acutely felt within the current Acorn Meadows development. Residents experience frequent flooding, impacting both communal green areas and private spaces. This recurring issue underscores the need for thorough consideration of the potential impact before approving further developments in Brailsford. That concludes my...
Thank you very much, John. The next speaker is Mr. Stephen Price, please, again on behalf of the Acorn Meadows Residents Group. And Stephen, I understand you're going to speak against the application.
Members of the committee, my name is Steve Price. I'm a retired teacher and resident of Acorn Meadows. Firstly, may I quote from a representation received from the head teacher of Brailsford Primary School on the 12th of February. Quote, "The school has been at full capacity for several years, and any additional house building in the local area would necessitate an extension to accommodate potential pupils. I expected that Section 106 funds would be allocated for this purpose. However, when previous developments by Cameron Homes, Miller Homes and Avant took place adjacent to, opposite and close to the school, plans to extend it were considered by the council but were shelved due to lack of funds. Notably, the most recent development by the very same Cameron Homes, situated opposite the school, did not provide any Section 106 funds for Brailsford School. I question the rationale behind this decision, considering the school was already over capacity when Cameron initiated the construction of their first development." Moving on to wildlife issues. As residents of Acorn Meadows, our efforts to elevate the standard of our green spaces has spanned several years. Regrettably, we remain dissatisfied with the outcomes delivered by Cameron. Even the assessment provided by Derby Wildlife Trust on the 7th of March describes the condition of the green areas and the wildlife pond as poor. And further, it suggests that the existing land has been taken into account in the ecological calculations for the new development. Therefore, counting this land within the current application does not provide the additionality required in the BNG good practice principles. Furthermore, I'd like to draw on your attention to comments and observations raised by a local resident, Mr. Rob Griffiths, who I've got three things here. One, he says that the proposed landscaping is minimal, and looking at the dead trees on the original Cameron development suggests no longer-term value. Secondly, species have been denuded from this area, and it's likely partly due to the unsympathetic adjacent Cameron development. It seems ironic that this is now a source of their low diversity argument. Irrespective of this, there are promising signs of recovery, with more diverse birdlife species now returning to the field on which the new development is proposed. Thirdly, it appears that calculations of net biodiversity and landscaping include land already in use on the existing development, notably the attenuation pond and surrounding area. If this is the case, then clearly the calculations are incorrectly based. To conclude, this plan is just wrong. Please reflect on the many genuine objections made against it, since we have only this chance to stop it. The heartfelt reasons everyone has given are in complete contrast to those of a profit-seeking developer which uses affordable homes as its mantra. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen, for your contribution. So we turn now to Gillian Woodhouse, please, Brailsford and Enderston Parish Council, to speak against the application. And I think we met you yesterday on the site visit, Gillian.
Yes. Good evening, Chairman. Good evening, members of the Planning Committee, ladies and gentlemen. As a parish councillor and a resident of Acorn Meadows, I ask you to turn down this planning application on the following grounds. We in Brailsford are suffering from crumbling infrastructure. Many now have to go to Ashbourne for GP services because our surgery cannot cope. Our children are not guaranteed a place at the local primary school because the school is oversubscribed. I doubt that the proposal by the applicant to provide 3 extra Key Stage 1 places and 4 key stage 2 places at the primary school will be enough. Our surface and sewage drains are often overwhelmed. The sewage has to regularly be removed by a tanker as the treatment facility cannot cope with it. There is increased significant flooding over the A52 due to the outdated pipework and drains. More development means less land to absorb the water. If this development takes place, the effect on the residents of Blackthorn Close will be unacceptable. They will experience increased traffic, noise, and movement, both during construction and afterwards. The visual enjoyment of their outlook will be completely destroyed. Congestion will be increased at the junction to this site on Luke Lane, where lorry, school traffic, and the speed of vehicles can make it very dangerous. On the 10th of May 2023, there was a near fatal incident 30 yards from this junction involving a 2-ton container lorry and a speeding car narrowly missing a head-on collision. There is still no pedestrian crossing from Sycamore Way to the school. In the proposed development plan for this application, our wildlife pond and all the children's play equipment have been removed, and the recreational green space has been greatly reduced. This site lies outside the approved village development boundary and increases the sprawl of the village away from its traditional centre. According to the Strategic Housing Land Availability Assessment document number 439, it considered appropriate to identify only 50% of this site developable based on the landscape assessment conclusions, and that some capacity for development exists on the site within the southern part. The southern part has now been developed. Brailsford has had its fair share of development over the past years. Any further development would impact negatively on the quality of life of many Brailsford people.
Gillian, I have to interject now, sorry, your time is up.
Thank you for listening.
Yep, thank you. Thank you very much. Finally, invite the applicant's agent, Mr. Stuart Wells, please, to address the committee. Does he have 5 minutes? And Stuart, you've got 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. My name is Stuart Wells, the agent for Cameron Homes. This application seeks the delivery of 33 new homes as a logical extension and second phase to the existing Acorn Meadows development off Luke Lane, which, as you know, has already been delivered by Cameron. The site is one of 8 new sites that have been identified as being suitable for allocation by the Council's Local Plan Working Group in their March 2022 report to this Council. This application has been prepared in response to the recommendations of that report, with the application coming forward now, given that there is a pressing need to address the current deficit in the Council's housing supply. In the same year, the Council's latest Strategic Housing Land Availability Assessment, otherwise known as the SHLA, considered that the development of this site would be regarded as a logical extension of the recent housing scheme to the south, being Acorn Meadows, and to mitigate landscape impact, the housing development in the northern corner, referring to this site, should be chamfered, tree belts re-established, and planting increased to the eastern boundary. Therefore, the proposed development before you is designed with a chamfered landscape edge, re-establishment of tree belts, and increased planting along the eastern and northern boundaries. As part of the SHLA assessment, the Highway Authority confirmed that a suitable access could be provided, and in subsequently reviewing this application, they raised no objection to the new access from Blackthorn Close. The SHLA ultimately found that, on balance, ensuring that appropriate landscape mitigation, highway and accessibility requirements are met, this site is considered to be developable. The site is therefore a prime candidate for development now, necessary to meet the current and pressing housing needs in the district. Reference is made to the previous application, which covered both this site and Acorn Meadows, and planning officers are correct in their report that circumstances have now clearly changed since that 2016 application, and the inability to meet the district's housing need now carries weight. To be clear, the change in circumstances reflects the recent assessment in the SHLA, the recommendations by the Local Plan Working Group, and the fact that the Council cannot currently demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply. As per national planning policy, the presumption in favour of sustainable development therefore applies, meaning that the application should be granted planning permission unless the adverse impacts would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. And in conducting this exercise, planning officers have found that there are no adverse impacts that would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits of this proposal. Officers have also found that the 33 dwellings on this site is an acceptable level of growth, having regard to the nature of Brailsford and its services and facilities. This is a sustainable village, and this site represents the most logical extension of Brailsford, being the second phase of a recently completed scheme, which is of a proportionate scale to the rest of the village. It rounds off the edge of the village and does not change the settlement pattern, nor does it set a precedent for further development to the north. Development of 33 dwellings on this site will also help to relieve the pressure to develop on other unsuitable sites in the village. The officer's recommendation to approve is subject to no objection from Derbyshire Wildlife Trust or the local flood authority, both of which have subsequently confirmed that they have no objection. The site lies within Flood Zone 1, and a drainage scheme has been designed to ensure that there will be no surface water flooding on site or elsewhere. There are no impacts on trees or wildlife, and the development will result in a net increase in the number of trees, whilst delivering gains in habitats and hedgerows. Cameron are also committed to a £138,000 contribution to additional places at Brailsford Primary School, as well as affordable housing and a contribution towards improvements to play areas in Brailsford. To conclude, the Council's own Local Plan Working Group has recommended this site for development, and in undertaking their assessment of the application, your planning officers have correctly found the proposed development to be wholly acceptable and appropriate for Brailsford, and is necessary to address the current deficit in housing supply. Therefore, as per the recommendation of your officers, this application should be approved. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wells. So I'll pass it over then to Chris. Perhaps, first of all, you'll outline the application for members, and then after Chris has spoken to us, then it will be open for questions.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd just like to draw members' attention to the late representations that have been received in respect of this item. Members will note the officer recommendation is one of approval, subject to authority be delegated to either development manager or principal planning officer to grant planning permission, subject to receipt of no objections from both Derbyshire Wildlife Trust and the lead local flood authority. There are a number of late items of representation that have been received. Within those representations are comments from both Derbyshire Wildlife Trust and the lead local flood authority. Addressing the first item, we've had comments from Derbyshire Wildlife Trust. They had raised some concerns about potential double counting, and one of the speakers that has addressed members this evening has mentioned that particular issue also. That has been clarified in the officer's response to that section, where revised assessment of overall net gain for the site has been undertaken, and that demonstrates that an 8.54% gain in habitat biodiversity will be delivered and a 23.05% gain in hedgerow units. The second item of late representation relates to the comments from the lead local flood authority. Following clarification on how the greenfield calculations had been reached which have fed into the land drainage proposals for this site, the lead local flood authority are happy that the assessment is robust and that the system is satisfactory from their perspective, so as to not cause flooding on site or in the local area. The proposals include provision for climate change and urban creep, and the attenuation basin on site will be enlarged to accommodate additional surface flows from this development. You'll note that they've recommended a number of conditions, and if members are minded to approve the application, This evening, it would be on the basis of the recommended conditions in the report, but also the conditions recommended by the lead local flood authority and Derbyshire Wildlife Trust, which are detailed in the late representation sheet. We've then received comments from 3 local residents that members will need to read and have regard to, and also a letter, an open letter from Sarah Dines MP, which members may just want a brief moment just to read in full.
We'll take a few moments then, members, to do that, please.
Yeah, that's fine.
Right, I'm going to invite Chris now to carry on with his presentation, please.
Okay. So planning permission is sought this evening for the erection of 33 dwellings on this particular site. The site extends to 1.77 hectares in area. Members had the benefit yesterday of visiting the site to consider the impact of the development on the local environment. I think it's worth at this point just setting out the policy context. Members will note and officers realise that this site currently sits outside of the village envelope or the defined settlement framework boundary in the adopted Derbyshire Dales local plan. In the address by some of the speakers to members this evening, reference has been made to a strategic housing land availability assessment that was conducted in 2016, and that did consider the existing Acorn Meadows development and also land to the north, which forms part of this application. At that time, development on land to the north was considered to be encroaching and harmful in landscape terms, and that part of the application was omitted from an application that had been submitted to Derbyshire Dales District Council around that time for those reasons. At this moment in time, the council cannot demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, and what that means is that we have a national policy which is very much geared towards housing delivery, and what it states is that in circumstances where councils cannot demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, there's essentially a tilted balance in favour of development unless the adverse impacts of granting planning permission would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. So the starting point here is a tilted balance in favour of development. Our own local plan includes provisions in circumstances where we can't demonstrate 5-year housing land supply. And what that says is that the council will consider sites on the edge of more sustainable settlements. So having regard to the hierarchy, the settlement hierarchy within our local plan, the preference is for delivery of new development in market towns, so the most sustainable settlements in our district. We've got 3 market towns. We've then got Darleydale, which is a large service centre, and then we've got larger villages, with Brailsford being one of those villages, and is a tier 3 settlement in our local plan. So there is provision in the local plan for which allows for developments on the edge of tiers 1 to 3 settlements, and Brailsford is a tier 3 settlement in this case. So we have to assess the application in that context. As part of the local plan review, this site was identified as being available for development, and as the last speaker correctly mentioned, this site was deemed developable as part of that process. We assessed a number of criteria, landscape being one of those criteria, and it was assessed as being, well, it was given an amber score in respect of landscape. So it's recognised that there is a ridgeline that crosses this site, and the existing development, as you approach Brailsford from a northerly direction, members will have noticed yesterday when they were travelling to the site on the bus that the existing development is visible in views, and it's the first thing you see when you approach Brailsford in that direction. And clearly bringing development closer to the main road will result in development being even more prominent in views. However, the landscape assessment work that was carried out recognised that whilst there would be some impacts in the context of that existing development and that existing built form, those impacts weren't considered to be sufficiently harmful for the development score red or to be unacceptable in landscape terms. And in officers' opinion, that in itself wouldn't be a significant and demonstrable reason to refuse planning permission this evening. We have got a sustainable urban drainage strategy for the site that does propose sustainable urban drainage. That does include provision for climate change, and it also includes provision for urban creep as well. So it has got built within it sufficient capacity to deal with surface water from this development to not result in flooding of the site or the local area. We are aware that Brailsford is a relatively small settlement. It does have some service and facilities. It's got a shop. It's got A52 running through it with links to settlements, more sustainable settlements. And in the general spatial approach to development, Brailsford is seen as a village that can accommodate some growth, and we feel that 33 dwellings is an acceptable level of growth in that context. Happy to take questions at this stage.
Can I just remind members, it is questions, not a debate. Please be concise and at this point, questions. So, Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. So, a couple of questions. The SLA refers to housing for 20 built houses, not 33. Can you comment on that? And drainage and sewage. I think the residents have pointed to a number of issues with drainage and sewage. Are you aware, Chris, that the LLFA has taken into account the evidence provided by residents about the poor quality of the sewage and drainage infrastructure in Brailsford and its inability already to cope with the existing requirement for drainage and sewage, let alone new houses? And then about the pedestrian crossing to the school, would it be possible, if we approved this, to add that to the list of requirements under the Section 106 agreement? And then turning to recreational green space and reduced children's play equipment, is that correct, because I think there was an inconsistency in the drawings, if I recall from yesterday's meeting. So I think that's all. I believe the school role is already covered, so I wasn't going to bring that one up.
David, can I just remark to members, bear in mind you are only allowed to ask 3 questions at this point.
Who said that?
Yeah,
I don't know of that rule.
Helen, are you able to?
I don't believe that. I've never heard of that rule.
Right.
I would like all my questions answered. And if nobody will answer those questions, I would ask one of my colleagues to ask those questions, because I have got 5 reasonable questions.
Yeah.
I want them all answered, David.
Yeah.
Okay?
David,
I want them all answered.
David,
I'm
please,
not going to be
David, please calm down. I'm not trying to shut
Yes,
you
you
up.
are.
Right, well, on that basis, I am so sorry, David, but please take the chair. Sue, take over. I'm sorry, but I'm as entitled as you are to get worked up, and you're doing me no favours, David.
I'm sorry.
Just to say that Chris here is willing to ask.
I think I am happy to answer the questions.
Out of order, David, and it leaves a lot to be desired.
Are you staying, David? Are you staying? Are you staying, Councillor Burt?
No, I'm sorry.
You going?
David's a grown-up man, and if that's the best he can do for a fellow colleague, it's time I weren't even in our room.
Right. So, what I'd suggest we do then is, are you aware, Chris, of the first three questions? And then if somebody else is prepared to ask the other two.
I have written down the questions, so I'll try and answer them if that's okay.
Okay. Yes, that's what I propose that we do. So you've got the first three. If we answer those, and then the next two, Councillor Murphy will officially put those forward.
Can I just clarify the question? So I've got the 20 houses that was identified as part of the initial SHLA work that's been carried out. We've got the drainage and the evidence that's been presented by the public, and whether I'm satisfied that that's been considered by the lead local flood authority. The section whether a crossing could be introduced through Section 106 agreements, and then you had a question about the children's play space on the site and whether that would be compromised by this particular development. And then,
Whether you were aware the flood authority had taken into consideration the evidence provided by residents in coming to their decision.
okay, yeah. So in terms of the first question, and as part of the SHLA work that was undertaken, a very simple exercise was carried out based on location of the site and applying a number of dwellings per hectareage assessment of what the available capacity might be on the development site. And we've got an application before us, so the developer in this particular case has looked at the site, the area, and they've looked at the character of the existing development that this development would be closely associated with, and have determined that this amount of development is appropriate to that site. And it's very much a matter of judgment in terms of whether officers or members in this particular case agree that it is an appropriate amount of development. As officers, we feel that it is commensurate with what's been delivered on the adjacent site. We feel it's compatible with the site and its environment, but it's very much a matter of judgment. Drainage. I'm not aware of any evidence as such being presented to officers. Obviously, there's a lot of public comment, and people have raised concerns about the drainage infrastructure. I think it's generally accepted by the community that it's creaking at best at the moment. So that information is out there. In terms of whether that constitutes evidence or not, I suppose that's open to interpretation. But the lead local flood authority have looked at this development objectively. So they've looked at the sustainable urban drainage strategy for the site, and they've looked at that and have satisfied that it would function in a manner that wouldn't cause flooding on site or in the local area. Severn Trent Water, inquiries will have been made with Severn Trent Water in terms of whether they can accommodate foul flows from the development, and developers or the water company are obliged to take foul flows from new development if there's capacity. And if there isn't capacity, they have to upgrade their infrastructure accordingly. And often we find that the water companies, they identify capacity. It's very rare that you're in a situation where a water company will say, no, we haven't got the capacity and we need to upgrade our infrastructure. That's not something that I'm aware of in respect of this particular application. With regard to the crossing point, because we're effectively dealing with alterations to the highway, so we would have to have the authority from or a reason in planning terms to require that, and the Highway Authority's agreement to forming a crossing point across Luke Lane to access the school. And I think without that agreement, whilst we could encourage it through a footnote or potentially a condition which explores it, to insist on it is not something that we could effectively deliver without the backing of the local highway authority. Children's play space, there is some equipment on the site which you'll have seen yesterday. The intention is that will remain. In terms of new play space on the development site, the site is within a 10-minute walk of a park off the plain, and the intention is for commuter sum to be paid so that the play provision or equipment on that part can be upgraded, given the close proximity of that facility to the site.
Okay, so, Chris, are you aware of the next two questions that are going to be formally asked by you? Oh, right.
Thank you. I'll refrain from answering those questions. Outside the settlement boundary, this is, we keep eroding the settlement boundary. I think the policy really is that outside the domestic settlement boundary it should be affordable housing. But some of this is affordable, but it's outside the settlement boundary. Chris has explained that to get the housing numbers we've got to start and go outside the settlement boundary. So I don't know if that's... It's a question, it's outside the settlement boundary, so... Yeah, that's my first question. My next question is regarding... I spoke yesterday about it. The streets are supposed to have a lot of tree lined, but now the trees are going on the outskirts of the development. We need trees. Climate change, we need lots and lots of trees. So it'd be nice if we had avenues of trees. So I'm really not too happy about that being taken away. School crossing is definitely needed. I'm sorry, sir. It's not a question.
Sorry, Councillor Clark.
That's it.
I really must insist that the questions, we can
next.
debate later and you can put your
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Chair. First question's about the school places. I noted the 138,000 in there. Working in a school myself, school's already oversubscribed. This is going to bring in more school places. I don't think doing the maths, 138,000, I can't see being enough to build an extension. So I'm assuming the school is not going to be able to take the new students into it, which is meaning there's going to be an increase in travel to school. So is that potentially an issue in terms of sustainable development if the children in the village are not able to go to the village school, and it's going to encourage more journeys? So that's a question about sustainability based on the school places issue. And then just something related to this idea of phase 1 and phase 2. So the agent referred to this development as phase 2. So when the initial development was put forward, was there always a plan in there that would be a phase 2, or is this phase 2 just something they're now sort of trying to suggest it was always going to happen? And linked to that, there's suggestions from several of the speakers tonight that many of the commitments that the developers said they were going to do in phase 1 haven't been done properly and finished off properly. So, until that's done, until phase 1, as they're putting it, has been finished, is there a case for us to say at least we can defer this until at least we're satisfied that phase 1 has been completed to the standard they said they would? I think that's 3 questions.
Answering the first question about the commuter sum or developer contribution to be used to provide school places, the County Council use a model which basically calculates how much it would cost to basically extend an existing facility to accommodate pupil numbers, it's based on per pupil. I'm assuming there must be a number before that becomes, a viable proposition. But in theory, that contribution should be spent on providing that number of school places at that particular school. The exact mechanics of it, I don't want to, mislead you in any way, are unknown, unfortunately. But that, in theory, is how that works. Just going back to some comments I made earlier in the evening. When the original development came forward, it may have been that there was deemed to be sufficient capacity in the school at that time, and we know from other developments that we've looked at that pupils on roll in the next 5 years for some reason is declining despite an increase in population in the Derbyshire Dales district, and we believe that to be the demographics, because there's a higher proportion of 50+ residents that live in the district. But we're in a situation here where there is a need for school places, and the school is at capacity, hence why we need a contribution in this particular case, and that should be spent on the extension of that school to provide those school places. In terms of phase, whether we knew or whether people knew there would be a phase two, I suppose that depends who you ask. Yesterday at the site visit, residents who will be who adjoined this particular site were very clear in that when they purchased their properties, they were told that there wouldn't be any future development on this particular site. It was always identified as part of the original application that we received that all of the site was to be developed, and it was revised so that the northern part of the site was taken out of the development. We can't guarantee, as part of the planning process, that developments won't come forward at a future, or sites won't come forward for development at a future date. And I think that's what's happened here, in that at a moment in time, only part of the development or part of the site was considered suitable for development. We're in a different scenario here in policy terms that we have to respond to, and we have to assess this application on its merits. In terms of the last question, I've got here the commitments of the developer. Having visited the site yesterday, the standard of landscaping generally was considered to be high. Reference has been made to trees that may have died. Some of the landscaping might not have taken, that might need to be revisited and looked at. But my general feeling was that the standard of landscaping on this development was sufficiently high, and I'm not aware of any breaches of planning conditions relating to landscaping on this particular site.
Councillor Dobbs, please.
Thank you, Chair. Chris, could I ask you a question about, in your report, 7.44, fourth line? It's about the hydro brake. Control chamber is increased from 16 litres per second to 6.5 litres per second. Is what it says. And
you just, sorry, point me in the right direction?
It's on my page 58.
58,
Section 7.44 of the officer report, the application process that it's about surface water discharge, my favourite topic.
Oh, yeah. Yes, I don't believe that's a typographical error, because the plans include a new hydro brake to reduce the flows. So there'll be additional storage capacity and a new hydro brake to limit flows to that level, was my understanding.
Yeah, I think actually if you look at the report, sorry, I'll do it in debate, but I think there's a different explanation. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Buttle.
Thank you, Chair. And Chris, I've got a bit of a question. Have we got any outstanding enforcement action against the phase one?
Not that I'm aware of.
Great. The commenters from the community mentioned biodiversity net gain good practice. I didn't really catch what they were saying there. I was wondering if you could explain that. Thank you.
Yes, it relates to the method of calculating net gain and habitat units that have been created on site. So in the late representation sheet, I've tried to sort of cover that. And so there is a revised calculation, and that demonstrates a net gain of 8-point-something% and a much higher percentage for hedgerow units that would be created.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I'll have another go at that. I did have one final question. I know this is probably a bit hopeful, but if Severn Trent actually said we can't take the sewerage, would we still have to give planning permission?
Depends on what they said to us. If they were to say to us, because they still have an obligation to accommodate foul flows from new development, but if they said, in terms of our capital projects, it's going to take us 10, 15 years to do these works, then if we were to grant planning permission with a lifespan of just 3 years, then clearly that wouldn't be appropriate. So it would, put a halt on the development for a period of time until that infrastructure was delivered. But we're not in that scenario here.
4, please.
One then. Well, I'm going to ask our legal services manager
I'll
after we've
leave it,
had
I'll leave it.
questions.
I was only going
to-
to ask about trucking.
No, please do, please
Yeah.
do. She's going to just speak to us when we've had all the questions.
Right, thank you.
So you can ask your question.
Go on then. Is it relevant that Severn Trent are trucking sewerage away from their local depot because their infrastructure isn't up to what they said they were going to do previously, or what said they were going to take away in Brailsford in the past?
I'm unable to comment on whether that, is an acceptable way of disposing of foul waste. I don't know whether the existing treatment plant or wherever it is that they're pumping this sewage from, whether that's part of that operation.
Right, I'll save the word sustainability for the discussion.
Councillor Murphy, please.
Thanks, Chair. It's about highways. Obviously, there's issues raised in communications from the Parish Council about highways issues. I don't see them addressed in what's been submitted by Highways. Do we send these objections and issues and concerns that parish councils and individuals have to Highways for them to create an answer and send it back? Or do we depend on them going on to the portal and having a look?
It is the latter, and you've got to appreciate as well, publicity and consultation is carried out at the same time with consultees and the public. So the point the local highway authority have made comments, they may not have read all of the public comments at that point.
It's not satisfactory in a sense, is it, for individuals, because they'll think we're ignoring their concerns and whatever. So they'll be better off sending their concerns direct to the Highways Authority.
Yes, often that does happen, but we have to trust that competent authority that they look at these developments objectively and will identify any issues as they arise. This is development of 33 houses, so I think that has to be assessed in that context and that scale of development.
Okay, thank you, Chris.
Councillor Maelstrom, sorry.
Thank you. Chris, just very quickly, are we allowed to condition the planting of trees along the streets as well as around the boundary? And are we allowed to condition solar panels, which seem to be missing? And I don't really understand why all new developments don't have solar panels on.
Yes, the issue of street trees is covered in the report. Officers felt that the existing development is something that the government encourages now, that streets are tree-lined. We felt that in the context of this particular site, the existing development isn't characterised by tree-lined streets, and also we wanted to create a strong settlement edge. So we wanted to focus those trees on the periphery of the site and creating a bit of a wooded margin on the northern corner of the site to help filter views of the development as you approach the village. So where justified, street trees do not have to be provided in accordance with national policy, and we feel that there is appropriate justification here. You might disagree with that.
Well, that was my question. Are we allowed to condition that if we want to?
You could, if you wanted to, if you felt that it was appropriate in this particular instance. You raised another question, solar panels. Yeah, you'll note there is a condition to secure measures to help mitigate the effects of adapt to climate change as part of the recommendation that's before you. In terms of meeting more stringent building regulation requirements, I'd expect some form of microgeneration on the houses. So I'd expect that some of them would have solar panels. It's just unfortunate that's not being shown on the application details that have been submitted to us. But that's something certainly that we'd be encouraging as part of discharging that condition.
But again, can we require it by condition?
If you felt it was absolutely necessary in planning terms, I think I'd say it wouldn't meet the tests, the test for conditions. I think we can explore what's possible and secure the maximum possible with the developer, but to insist on it is probably a step too far in terms of meeting the condition, the test for planning conditions.
I'd like to ask a couple of questions, if I may, mainly for clarity, really. I noticed in the report from our tree officer who's looked at the plans and suggested that the site layout be redesigned to provide a significant buffer to protect these trees that have got TPOs. Has that been done? That's the first question. Then, do you want to answer that one first?
Yes, there has been some amendments to this application. So one of the dwellings has been removed from the northern part of the site, what was a bungalow. So there has been some modifications, and we're happy that although there's some very minor encroachments into the root protection area with conditions, that the health and the impact on those trees will be minimal.
Thank you. And the second question is about housing, basically, and affordable homes. I notice our Director of Housing on page 21 appears to be a little bit disappointed that some of the affordable homes don't meet the nationally described space standards. Am I correct in thinking that that's not something that we can condition for them to be up to these standards?
I think a lot of, if not all of the dwellings do meet the space, and I'm sure this is covered somewhere in the officer's report, but I'll just need to find the right section.
Say so on page 21 from the Director of Housing.
It's covered in the office at the issues and appraisal section, but I can try and find the relevant section for you.
They are up to.
My understanding is that if not all, the majority of them meet nationally described space standards.
Yeah. So I've asked this on several occasions, I think, in this planning committee. So that's not something that we can condition to bring them to, all of them to, the nationally described space standards.
The development is applied for in full, so the dwelling houses are as set out on the drawings that we've received. So we'd have to assess, or we'd have to make a decision based on the application as submitted. Our local plan refers to housing mix as opposed to size of properties, and that's something we might want to consider as part of the local plan review. But we consider the general mix of housing on this site to be in accordance with policy. And my understanding is all or the vast majority of these houses meet nationally described space standards regardless of that.
So just to be clear, the majority but not all.
I need to find the relevant section of the report, I think, before coming back to you.
It's on page 21, sorry.
Yeah, I think you're referring to the Director of Housing's
Yes,
comments, but I think it's
yes.
covered somewhere in the officer's report. It might be actually setting the application out. I remember writing it. Sorry, paragraph 2.3 of the officer's report. So all properties meet internal floor space standards set out in the nationally described space standards. Paragraph 2.3.
That's different to what I'm reading on page 21. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. More questions from any members? Okay, so I'm now going to ask Kerry France, our legal services manager, just to explain what the position is about the number of questions that we can ask.
Good afternoon, members. The chair did ask me about was there a limit on how many questions a member can ask, and I did make reference that that there was some reference to 3 questions, and that I'd look further into that. And upon reading part 4 of our rules of procedures, there is reference, and the wording says that at any one meeting, no person may submit more than 3 questions, and no more than 1 question may be asked on behalf of one organisation. So there is reference to 3 questions, but that does appear in section 14, which is specific reference to public participation. So members, you are welcome to ask as many questions as you require, and that would have been communicated when I'd had a moment to sort of reread what the Constitution says. So
Thank you, Kerry. We now move on to the debate. And before we start the debate, do I have a recommendation from a member?
Can we listen to the debate first
Well,
before we do
normally
that?
we start with a, I think I'm correct, we start with a recommendation.
In that case, I'd like to move deferment on the basis that there is insufficient evidence from the Highways Authority and from the Lead Local Flood Authority and Severn Trent that they have taken into consideration the local issues on this site as presented in evidence by the residents who are here tonight and in representations provided, and that we await the detailed understanding of the way in which the drainage system works and the sewage system off-site can take what comes off this particular site in order to, and a full evaluation of that from the Lead Local Flood Authority, and similarly with the issues that have been addressed by residents associated with highways. And I'd like to move that as our position. Thank you.
Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor? Any more comments on that, or is anybody prepared to, or I can then go to the vote? Did you want to make a comment, Councillor Dobbs?
That's a good point. If we're for deferment, it's got to be relevant to deferment. Yes, I think we don't have enough information. I think the response from the Lead Local Flood Authority is almost a classic of its kind. It not only arrived late, but it's almost completely generic. You know, these are simply the rules that you have to follow when you dispose of surface water, and it doesn't really help the situation. I noticed too, and that was what I was getting at in my question, that there's a repeated error, which is always a bit worrying. It's actually from the drainage report, and it's basically cut and pasted into 7.44. 16 litres per second, you can't increase to 6.5. What it means is by 6.5. So the total surface water that it will be attenuated to is the sum of those two, which I can't do in my head. Yes, I can, 22.5 litres per second. And this is worrying. This is important stuff. This is whether people's gardens get waterlogged or not, and nobody's noticing. This is worrying. Thank you, Chair.
The slack.
Thank you, Chair. We do need housing. We all realise that. We desperately need housing. But some of this, I agree with the deferment, really, because we have a lot of issues to address, such as drainage, such as looking at, same as Laura just said, tree lining these streets, and getting more trees on the site, plus a new crossing for the children. There's lots more to go into this, to be added to this application. And I'm not against it, but it needs renewing and doing properly, and I don't think it's been done properly. There's a lot more to go into this and needed. So I support the deferral.
Councillor Archer, you wish to speak?
Yeah, just a quick comment, really. It's just like a feeling of deja vu. I think I've got a huge sympathy for our officers, because I think they're doing everything correctly and interpreting all the rules and regulations correctly, and we're being asked to follow them. However, we have very serious concerns, again, about the due diligence of the people we're supposed to be trusting to make these judgments, and that not being consistent with what our own eyes and our residents' eyes are seeing on the ground, which puts us as committee members in a really difficult position, because we on the one hand have to protect the interests of our residents, on the other hand we have to respect the expertise of our officers and agencies such as the local flood agency. So with all that considered, while I do, I think, support the idea of a deferment on that basis, I'm not entirely sure it's going to get us anywhere, but I think it gives us an opportunity to try and get it somewhere, so therefore I will support it.
Councillor Buttle.
I'm still a bit worried about the sustainability, really, of this. If we've got people busing their kids to a school in Ashbourne, or there's no it just doesn't feel like it's a properly joined up application. So I'd be very pleased to see it brought back with a few more trees and a bit more of a plan. Thank you.
Councillor Bates.
I've got to agree. I think there's so many unanswered questions here. Flooding issues on the A52, constantly flooded by the Rose and Crown, and this has only just happened since the new developments have been put in place. The infrastructure is broken. I think we're quite clear on that. Overdevelopment of the village. I think Brailsford has had more than enough development in the village. HGVs, the traffic that's coming down this corner here is ridiculous, and the speed that they're coming down, we noticed that yesterday. I think it needs to be addressed. I think it needs a speed limit right round the top corner of the north area, probably 30 miles an hour, even 20 miles an hour, because you're coming round to a school. I just think Brailsford just had the brunt of this at the moment, and I think this is just too much for it, and that's just my opinion.
Thank you. So it has been moved and seconded for deferral. Can I take a vote on that, please? All those in favour of a deferral? Thank you. That would appear to be unanimous. Are you happy that we've got reasonable reasons for deferral?
I think we seek clarity on some of these
Okay.
issues, yeah.
Oh. Moving on then to application 5.2, which is 23/00223. That's been withdrawn. 5.3, application 24/00094 single storey rear extension at 5 Thorpe View, Ashbourne, Derbyshire. For clarification, this has been brought to committee because it is a member of our own staff who's put in this application.
Right, it's a small rear extension.
Not about this application, no.
The previous one.
No, we've finished that item.
Okay, it's just a single-storey rear extension. There's just a late rep about how much it measures because the applicant had to provide some clarity on the measurements and the scale. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? No? Okay, we'll move to the debate. Do we have a recommendation? Councillor Bates? Okay, do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Dobbs? Okay, anyone else wish to speak? Or does anybody wish to speak on this one? So I'll move to the vote then. It has been moved and seconded for approval. Can I have a show of hands, please? Those in favour? That appears to be unanimous. Thank you very much. Which is 23/01284, full change of use of 2 agricultural buildings to commercial use, Class E, B2 and B8, part retrospective at Longford Hall Farm, Long Lane, Longford, Derbyshire. Is this yours, Chris? That's Sarah's, yeah. Oh, sorry, yeah.
Oh, yes.
Thank you, Chair, and the committee for the opportunity to speak this evening. As detailed within the officer report, full planning permission is sought for the change of use of 2 agricultural buildings to 2 commercial uses at Longford Hall Farm. The applicant has run Longford Hall Farm for many years. Due to the modernising of modern farming methods and machinery, the applicant needs to consolidate the farming activities within the remaining agricultural buildings at the site, and also wishes to further find other income revenue streams in order to ensure the long-term viability of the farm. As it stands, one of the units is used for storage and the other is an empty cowshed. There are sufficient agricultural buildings on the farm to ensure that the storage needs are met and the farm can and will continue to operate. The proposal is for the next step in farm diversification schemes to fund the renovation of the listed barn complex and to ensure the agricultural enterprise is more resilient to a changing market. Progress is being made in this regard following the successful completion and occupation of the first phase of commercial change of use units at the site. Funds have already been channelled into the repair of the Grade 2 star coach house and stable block, as well as the Grade 2 star barn. This scheme will assist in further repairs and the maintenance of the coach house, as well as the Grade 2 cowshed. This proposal is for the creation of up to 4 commercial units within the existing agricultural buildings, which will no longer be required for the continued operation of the farm. There will be 3 within Building 1 and a single unit within Building 2. In order to fully enclose the building, minor alterations to Building 2 are also proposed. These will provide pest protection and an improved level of security. The buildings are utilitarian in character, as is common with most farms. The proposed alterations to the agricultural buildings will have a neutral impact on the overall character of the area. Their conversion to commercial use will clearly be a benefit to the nearby listed buildings and therefore directly improve and enhance the site's character. The change in modern farming methods also reduces the employment opportunities. The change of use of these buildings to a commercial use will provide additional employment opportunities within the local area. Therefore, the resulting public benefits are considered to be twofold. They will provide rural employment opportunities and preserve heritage assets for future generations. These proposals are therefore in accordance with local plan policies EC1, PD2 and S4. There are some other points of which warrant clarity. The application site is accessed via a private road which currently serves the farm, located off Long Lane. The local highway authority did not raise any objections to the application, subject to visibility improvements and the implementation of passing places. The suggested conditions detailed in the Officers Committee report are considered to be acceptable and the applicant is agreeable to the proposed conditions. The comments raised in relation to Longford Public Footpath 3 are also acknowledged. The buildings in question currently obstruct the footpath, having been built a long time before the applicant took control of the farm. As detailed in the officer's report, public right-of-ways are subject to highways legislation and therefore it is not possible to attach a condition which can be enforced by a local planning authority. However, the applicant can and will seek to redirect this route to provide a walkable alternative. To conclude, the proposals will create opportunities for rural employment generation, the revenue from which will be used to restore the heritage assets that are located throughout Longford Hall Farm. In regards to all these matters raised, and when assessed against the policies of the local plan and the framework, it is considered that planning permission should be granted. I therefore invite you to follow the advice of the officer and approve the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hyde. Spot on for time. So thank you for that. Sarah, this is yours, please.
I don't really want to repeat it all, but obviously it's change of use. We have granted previously for other buildings on this site. It's acceptable in the countryside through farm diversification, and in this particular circumstance we are wanting to encourage the Grade 2 listed buildings, some of which are Grade 2 star, that are currently on the buildings at risk register, to be repaired, and obviously this will look to fund the repair works. I'll take any questions.
Any questions then, members? I think Councillor Bates, your hand was up first.
Can I ask what type of commercial unit we're looking at? Retail or is it industrial?
No, it's B1, B2 and B8. So that's B1 is generally something that is acceptable within, that wouldn't have its low-level impact on residential amenity, for example. B2 is general industrial, so it's a flexible use between the two. B8 is storage and distribution. In terms of B2, general industrial, if that were proposed and we had an occupier come in, we have conditioned some more things in terms of that. to ensure that noise and etc. is being, mitigated.
Can I come back on that? The question was for the amount of traffic coming down the lane, so that's fine by me. Thank you.
Councillor Boynton?
Thank you, Chair. I don't have a problem with the actual suggested change of use, but my question is, are we not condoning the blocking of a footpath by granting planning permission, a new planning permission, when the actual building itself is blocking the footpath, and therefore it's technically illegal, isn't it? I'm just worried that there might be some comeback on us for that.
Do you want to answer that, Sarah?
Obviously, the building exists, it's already blocking the footpath, and what we've said is that it's not within the remit of planning to prevent planning permission for that reason. It is something that it's a legal matter with the Highways Authority. All we can do is really, what we've done is add an informative to flag it, that it still remains an issue to be addressed.
Councillor Slack?
Mine was a similar question to Councillor Longdean's. Has the path been diverted, or is it acceptable to be diverted where it has?
I'm not aware it has been diverted, no.
So
Buildings
that is an
are
issue,
obstructing
that's
it.
an ongoing issue?
Yes.
Oh dear.
Any more questions from members? No?
Yeah, I said mentioned a B1 use. That is no longer the case. It's what's called an E use class. And we haven't restricted anything so that's an open E use class. So they could come in with that B2 or B8 in these circumstances.
Any more questions from members? Yeah, Councillor Maelstrom?
Sorry, I'm confused about the use that it's being that we're permitting now. Are we permitting B1, B2, and B8, or are we permitting something else?
The use class order had changed, so it's not a B1 use class doesn't exist anymore. It became an E use class. That's what I'm referring to.
Just to provide some clarity on that. So an E commercial use classification includes a wide range of uses that you would expect to see or are compatible in a local centre. So it could include shops, financial services, and light industrial uses, office type uses. B2 is a general industrial use, and then you've got B8 storage and distribution use. So you've got a wide variety of uses within the E commercial use class, then the general industrial B2 use and B8 storage and distribution use. So it covers an awful lot.
Can I ask a follow-up question, Chair? Thank you. So does that mean if we allow this, that the application is effectively amended to an E-use class, which means they could use it for retail?
I think the description of development does include the E. So I've just had a quick look at the description of development. It does say for use for E-commercial use, B2 and B8. So that would be the effectively what we're given permission for, and that would be reflected in the description of development.
So my concern is just that the consultation hasn't been done on the basis that this might turn into a retail facility.
I think the description of developments, from my understanding, hasn't changed. I think it's always been E, because at the time of submission, B1 use classification didn't exist. So it'll have always been advertised with its current description, which is Class E, and B2 and B8, from my understanding. Sarah may be able to provide some clarity there.
Sorry, it does say it within the report B1, but obviously It's class, yeah, that's what I'm saying. We do refer to B1, which is maybe where I've got it from, and that's what was in my speech, but that isn't correct. That's why I came back on it. The description of development is EU's class, and that is correct, and that's how it's been advertised.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Maelstrom?
Yes, just as long as it's been put to
Clarified.
consultation on the proper basis. Yeah.
Okay. Any more questions then? We'll move to the debate. It has been recommended for approval subject to the conditions stated in the report. Do we have a recommendation? Councillor Slack?
I'd move it, Chair, but I am concerned about the footpath, and I do hope we can get clarification on that shortly. So just ask you another question. I'm going to come back on with a question, Chris, but is the farmer willing to see the footpath in?
It is an offence to obstruct a public footpath.
Yeah.
So it depends on whether it's going to be dealt with under the Highway Act or the Planning Act, but it becomes an enforcement matter that will have to be...
It will be enforced,
be addressed, yes.
Yes, I'll move it, Chair.
Do I have a second? I think that was you, Councillor Archer. Do you wish to speak?
Yeah, just happy to second and do share the concern about the footpath. Hopefully that can get resolved, but broadly want to help our farmers to be able to diversify and keep their businesses going and provide local employment for the economy. So therefore happy to support this and second this.
Do I have anybody else wishing to speak? No? Councillor Dobbs?
Yeah, I'm just slightly worried about the contribution from Derbyshire County Council on PROW, rights of way, who make the point about the condition. They seem to suggest they want us to condition. Sarah, you're telling us that we can't condition, and they're saying that we must object if we can't condition. This seems to be a bit of a catch-22.
From a planning perspective, it's whether officers feel that there is a remedy here through this submission of this application, and this application involves the change of use of the building. So the building itself is lawful, and it's the building that encroaches or is situated on top of the legal alignment of that public right of way. So I don't think the remedy is conditioning this application because it doesn't relate specifically to the building, it relates to its use. That's why, as officers, we feel that this should be dealt with either through provisions of the Highway Act, or if it's related to an earlier planning application, through the Planning Act. It's something we'll need to pursue separately.
Thank you. In other words, their recommendation is actually technically incorrect for this circumstance.
In my opinion, yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Anybody else wish to speak? No, in that case then it has been moved and seconded for approval subject to the conditions stated in the report. Could we go to the vote please? All those in favour? And against? And abstentions? That's been carried with one abstention. Thank you. Item 6, which is the Appeals Progress Report on page 73. Chris, do you speak to that?
There's one further update. I don't know if it's listed on that current table. There's a tree appeal. We don't have many tree appeals. 65 Lime Tree Road. That decision came through this week, and that appeal was dismissed. That's the only update on that.
Wish to make any comments? Councillor Hughes.
Chair, just a question, Chris. There seem to be quite a lot of appeals. Is this extraordinary, or is it as a matter of course, do you think?
It's a good question. As an authority, we refuse an awful lot of applications. We do really try, and we are really hard on design. And members, hold applicants to account in a wide range of different matters. So you do find as an authority we refuse an awful lot of applications. But our appeal record is also very good. So it indicates that the quality of decision making is high at Derbyshire Dales at this moment in time.
Could I just ask, Chris, we seem to be waiting an awful long time for some of these appeals to be processed. Is the amount of time that we're waiting, is that normal?
It very much depends on the appeal. A couple of months ago, the planning inspectorate wrote to local planning authority to say that there was a 4-month delay in registering new appeals. However, we had the land lot 2 development land off Wyston Road appeal, where the appeal was lodged, and very quickly we had a start letter and agreement to a public inquiry. So it very much depends on the type of application and the circumstances surrounding the decision, I think, at this moment in time.
Quick question, Chris. There's a lot of tree applications, of course, clearing ash dieback, but I've noticed in the applications very often they add other trees in that surrounding area. So we need to retain good trees, don't we, really? You know, we don't want ash dieback to be a excuse for clearing other trees. So I think we've got to be diligent on that. The tree officer's got to be diligent on that.
Yes, we're very lucky as a district council to have a very competent tree officer who, you know, is very proactive in terms of identifying issues, looking to secure replacement trees, and also protecting trees of high amenity value across the district. We do issue a lot of new tree preservation orders.
Yeah, because we've seen a lot of open spaces now with ash dieback, aren't we? You know, it's distressing, really. Thank you.
So I'm happy to move this report. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Hughes. I'm going to take. We'll go to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. The Planning Committee, thank you all for coming. It's been a slightly difficult meeting, but I think we've achieved what we needed to achieve. So thank you all. And thank you to Perry and Angela for their help. And of course to Chris and Sarah, thank you.